Go ahead.
3, 2, 1, 0. Hi, I'm Carrie Ellis, author of 21st Century Superhuman, and I'm here with John Anderson, and we are doing our 21st Century Superhuman show. Today we're doing a show on GANS, which stands for gas in its nano state. John, I guess I better let you say hello right away and tell us what gas in a nano state is. You're going to be able to do a great definition of that, I think.
Well, hi everybody. How you doing? Happy to be here again. What we're working on today is essentially the power source for the cache technology. The gas in a nano state is one state of matter, which is one step below just plasma, which is the pure energy field of this. The way I look at it is the GANS is plasma that acts like matter. So it's pure energy, essentially energy that we can manipulate, we can play with, put it in our hand and do stuff with.
I love that. I mean, I think GANS is the most magical material. I ended up from our friend Kevin from the Magrav site, I ended up getting a little mechanical. My thing is in Florida and I'm in Michigan right now, so I don't have my unit with me. It'd be fun to show it. But I actually ordered a pre-built unit for making GANS, which was very helpful to me in the beginning because I didn't have to put all the pieces together myself and figure it out. Instead, it was pre-made and it had a little spout on the bottom that you could drain the GANS out when it was done. And I love that material. It's just so sweet and fun. And I mean, we're still learning what we can do with it, but we're going to get into some details about that today.
Well, the uses of it are myriad. There's hundreds of them, depending upon the type of GANS that you have. If you're working with CO2 GANS, which is the white stuff,
right?
It not only is it just a general energy source that we use for a number of different things, but it also has a direct effect on your nervous system and your lymphatic system. And if you have pain, put a little bit of GANS on a paper towel, put it in a baggie, put it on your pain goes away. And I can explain that process. It's a little involved, if you want.
Yeah, and since the last video that we did was on the healing pens or the energy focusing units, and GANS can be involved with those if a person wants, but basically the pads you're talking about, I had some pretty good results with a kind of a sickness that I had, and just taking a little bit of, I had my GANS in a jar with some water on the top, and I took just a little bit of that water and put it in a bath and kind of gave myself exposure to that water that had been next to the GANS. Let me just read. I thought this was really fun. I got a message on Facebook today from one of our audience out there. And just today when we were getting ready to make this video, I thought this was really sweet, just to show that we've got people around the world that are trying this stuff out and learning and kind of growing together. So it's a great community to be part of. Let me just read this quick. Let's see if I can get it up here. It says, "Hi, Carrie, how are you? I have a question or maybe a request. I really loved the video you did with JC. So much fell into place and I made the pen. But there are also so many different explanations about making GANS, especially CO2, for the healing devices. I would love it if you also did an interview workshop with JC about that, which we're doing today, which is so cool. And the next step with the pen, necessitating and proper use of GANS. Thank you up front. Lots of love from Romania." And Annette is the person's name. So I thought that was very sweet. Thank you, Annette, and everybody else out there who's working on these things on your own and catching everyone where you can so that we can all be learning as a global community, because that's one of the best parts about these things, that we're in this It's called an open source learning process where there isn't just someone with a secret in their garage or at a university or at a laboratory, but we're all sharing this information together, and then a lot of people are getting to learn, practice, and grow in the process.
Most definitely. And one thing I should have mentioned last week or last show when we made the pens is what I'm showing is just one way to do this. There are as many ways to do this as there are people doing it. And some work better than others. What I'm going to be showing is the basic process, which is the minimum, what first came out from the Kesh Foundation as far as how to do this and how to do it effectively. There's lots of people adding electricity. They're adding LED lights, or not lights, but the LED electronic components
Right.
themselves, not an LED bulb. Got to make that distinction. Or a little computer fan, just as a load between the systems. I like what the Kesh Foundation came up with originally, and that is simply create your load by twisting the wires together, that's the way I'm going to be showing today. And
Right.
we're not going to see any results today. This does take 10 days to 2 weeks to collect. In the bottom of your container. In 2 weeks, there'll probably be maybe an inch of GANS in a 2-liter pop bottle, which is sufficient. That's enough if you have 3 of those, one CO2, one copper oxide, copper oxide, and one CH3. That's enough GANS to make one reactor.
So let's just talk a little bit more about what GANS is. And JC, let me just ask you, I have mine on gallery view, but it's basically showing you like your speaker view. So I don't know if I confused the system or what. I'm having a hard time getting it back. Oh, I can see both of us now. Oh, there you are. But I have it on speaker view and it's showing both of us.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
Oh, it just said my connection's unstable.
Oh, well, you seem pretty visible to me.
Gotta love expensive TELUS internet because they can't even run a 30K stream and keep it straight.
So let's explain a little bit more about what GANS is. And we did some really great explanations in the last video about what plasma technology is, and it's these expanded molecules. Is it expanded molecules or atoms?
Atoms.
So that it's allowing more energy to flow into it and through it.
Yeah, and the GANS is one step in the state of matter above nano, which is one step above gas. And it is the big puffy popcorn atoms like we described last week, but they're loose. They're floating free all over everywhere they need to go. And when they're big and puffy like that, they just radiate energy. They're remember the description I gave with the torus coil with the energy constantly moving?
Right.
Well, with a matter state atoms, that energy field is really tightly compact and it doesn't go very far. With the GANs, it's all loose and open and it just radiates out, and we have no idea how far this goes. Some people have read energy from their GANs many feet away from where they were at. So the more loose or the more open you make the atomic structure, the farther the energy is going to radiate.
It is really an amazing step into a new science and a new way of comprehending our reality. Reality is always in quotation marks, in my opinion, because reality is what we make it. But very exciting. I mean, just exciting that this gives us tools that we can use in new ways. And so that's what we're looking at today. And so some of the most basic ways that we're going to be using GANs that they're being used right now in these mediums that we're working in. Do you want to go through what some of those are?
Well, the simplest, most basic way you can use your GANs is to put it in a jar and set it on a shelf. It's going to radiate the energy out into your space.
Nice. So the people that are doing that are finding they're eating less food, they're having more energy,
They feel better when they wake up. They sleep better. Things balance out their emotional state. They don't get, the highs and lows aren't quite so crazy. They're a little bit more even. Some people, they're putting them in plastic tubing and wearing them as bracelets or necklaces.
Nice.
Um, just being in the field makes a difference in everything that you're doing,
Right.
particularly where it's associated with an emotional state. The people who report, such as myself, who report that they just wind up eating less, I know I tend to eat as an emotional uh, crutch.
Right. For nurturing or whatever.
Yeah, I like to eat,
Yeah.
and I noticed that is softened. It's less than it used to be, just because I have a bottle of CO2 GANs, and
That is amazing. That is very cool.
it has a definite balancing effect. The CO2 works on, like I said, the nervous system and the lymphatic system, which is the lymphatic is the body's way of moving energy for creation.
Nice.
So, or one of the ways the body moves energy for creation. So, if you need, you cut yourself and you need to grow some more tissue to fill that cut up, your lymphatic system is providing the information for that to some extent. Now, the copper oxide, the
So
green,
you just said CO2. You just described what CO2 does. So let's just explain that CO2 GANs is made out of zinc, right? Pieces
yes,
of, and I ended up getting some strips that go on the edge of a roof to keep moss from growing.
yep,
Um, and
exactly
so,
what I have here.
and that's what came in my original Magrav unit. And then, so you use a piece of that and a piece of copper, which we'll get into in a minute, but I just wanted to make clear CO2 is made from a zinc plate being
Yeah,
in copper. Okay.
and the way
And
that works, the field of the nano copper interacting with the field of the zinc creates a third, let's call it a vibration.
okay.
Just like music, if you think of it like music, you have two notes. When they come together, you get a third note out of it. Okay, it's called heterodyne. When you mix these two fields of specifically the nano copper and zinc, you get a field that likes carbon.
Wow.
Okay, so essentially you're making a magnet for carbon, and it draws the
Wow.
carbon in, draws it out of the water, draws it out of the plastic, draws it out of the air. When the carbon meets the water molecule, because carbon is much stronger than hydrogen, it steals those two oxygen atoms from the water molecule and becomes CO2. And because it's in that plasma state where this is created, it is a stable structure. So it doesn't want to stick to other bits of itself. It's just a happy little ball of energy that floats around inside your water. And you get enough of them collecting, and they're heavier than the water, so they sink down, and you can collect them off and use them for stuff.
That is amazing. I love that. I mean, I just want to start taking notes on what you're saying. So it's so great to hear that explained. In my brain, I can feel my brain just kind of tickling, going, wow, I'm understanding new information. I'm grasping new things about how this amazing world that we're in works.
Yeah.
And I want to toss in here just a random idea. I'm actually helping take care of for a few weeks a friend who had surgery recently. So I've ended up being around television a lot more than I usually am, both in her house and then in doctor's offices. And so the news is on and all these things. And I look at this news that I've learned is actually kind of made up and fabricated, a whole system that's sort of fabricated to keep us in fear and keep people battling against each other. And what I get really excited about is as we keep developing these new things, what we're doing is building a whole new concept of our reality. And so that we can be entering into a new world without even having to we can just look at that old one and go, you know what, right in the middle of this, we are building a new world. It is based in a peaceful process, based in us utilizing energy in a more powerful way, in a good way that can serve people. for healing and for free energy and all these different things. And it makes me really excited.
Yep. Well, I wanted to continue to expand on this. The CO2 is for basically your nerves, your emotions. If you have pain, because pain is when you cut yourself or you lose a limb or something happens, you sever the pathways for your nervous system. So the brain is sending signals out, heal, make new cells, feel this, move, whatever. If that signal can't get to where it's supposed to go, it reflects back to your brain, and your brain goes, ah, because it's not supposed to get that, and it interprets it as pain. So when you put the CO2 on there, you're giving some place for that energy signals to go. So they don't turn around and get shot back into your brain. They go into the CO2. That's how it takes away pain. That's the explanation that was given me. And when I use it, that's what feels like happening.
That is very cool.
The copper oxide is the right. I keep thinking of it in frequency because I know audio, I know video, I know radio signals, and that's kind of where my thinking goes. That it's not really a frequency, but it's the area that your muscles and soft tissue like. So if you have a cut or soft tissue injury, use copper oxide GANS on a pad.
And so copper oxide is going to be made from copper and copper.
Yes.
And what are the initials for that?
CuO.
CuO. I always have a hard time remembering all those separate ones. So we have CO2 and CuO.
Yep. C is carbon, Cu is copper.
Okay.
And if you're really wondering about this stuff, just look at the periodic table. All the information is in there.
Great.
And the third one that we produce is CH3, which is a very, very rudimentary sugar. And it is a massive power source. If you have a quantity of CH3 in your vicinity, you just tend not to get tired.
Wow. And the CH3 is made with the iron, is that
Yes.
correct? And that seems to make faster than the other ones, doesn't it?
Oh, it's quick.
Yeah.
If you set up your CH3, you're going to see results probably within 15 minutes.
Right.
But that's because it's red, and it's really easy to see it in the water.
Interesting.
Now, the copper oxide, the CH3 which is the iron and zinc or nano copper, is very fast. The CO2 is, I would say, that's a medium, and the CH or the copper oxide is very slow. The copper oxide, you're making a magnet for copper.
Right.
So when it draws the copper in to the water, it steals the oxygen. It's copper oxide. And in the basic process where you're not using electricity, you're not using any adjuncts added to the system, it is very slow, but you get a very nice product.
It's really fun having a little GANS factory going on. I just love it. And I was actually doing mine outdoors on a table outside in Florida with coverings over the containers. But, you know, it's just fun. It's like having it's not really, I guess it's living in some sense of the word, but it's like having this interactive experience going on. Nice, fun science project. And I can see us all kind of getting used to learning how to making GANs, these different types, and learning what the uses are for, and then having some kind of brewing all the time.
Well, one of the wonderful things about it, you brought it up a little earlier, alluded to it. Once you make a quantity of GANs, you know, like this is a 2-liter bottle. This is what we're going to be using today. So it's kind of huge. But if you even, you know, you have this much GANs, it will last a very, very long time because you don't need to use the white stuff. You use the water that you keep it in.
And is that what you actually put in a pain pad? You put just the water that you're keeping it in?
Yep.
Oh, good, because that's what I was using as well.
Yeah.
I mean, we should just say this right now because I know I have a lot of friends who are their own guinea people. And I mean, we're not really supposed to consume it, right? Is that correct?
Well, it's recommended not to.
Right.
There are some people who are doing it. There was one Chinese fellow who was drinking like a 100 ml every morning,
Wow.
and
Did he float away?
well, he put in. I think he did 2 reports on the net and then disappeared. No, I don't. I have no idea what happened to this guy.
Wow.
Um, my friend Linda Livesay, who's not with us anymore, she transitioned was about 3 months ago, 2 months ago.
Right.
The first time she made her GANs, she dumped it all over her arm,
Interesting.
and like she was working with her system, and it fell over and it poured all over her arm, and she just cleaned it up. People have manipulated it. They've bathed in it. You've done it yourself.
Right.
Um,
And I've taken my finger and dipped it in it and tasted a little bit, of the water, but I've been hesitant to consume any kind of amount of it. And I think we should caution people because I don't think anybody really knows at this point.
yeah, it's recommended that you don't.
Right.
It's probably, if an accident happens and you spill it and you get a little bit in your mouth or up your nose or in your eye, wash your eye out, obviously. If you get it on your skin, just wash it. Don't panic, because it's very natural. It's everywhere. We got it in us now,
Right.
so it's probably not going to hurt you. Some people have had very very nice things happen when they've had these accidents, and some people have had some pretty nasty things happen. So we can't predict what it's going to do to any specific individual. All we're just recommending, if you don't have to, don't.
Right. And it's the CO2 GANs that seems to be, I know somebody put the copper GANs in a pool with fish and the fish died.
Yes.
I remember hearing that on one of the tapes. So probably the copper and the iron are maybe a little more, I don't know what the word would be.
Well, we know anybody who has raised fish knows that even the tiniest little bit of copper ions in your fish tank will kill your fish.
Interesting. Hmm.
So don't do that. If you want to experiment with that sort of thing, put it in a separate environment. Put it in a jar, or a plastic bag that's not going to break. So you're not putting the actual GANs in whatever you're going to be experimenting with. All you're doing is you're transferring the energy of that GANs.
And that, I think us getting the idea that can work. It's another step into understanding the cosmos in which we live. That you just have the substance and you put it next to another substance, and that's what's happening with food, isn't it? They're putting food maybe on top of a container of GANs. The GANs ends up tasting like or smelling like the food, and then just by
Uh, that's sort of, but it's not really
okay,
that accurate. What's
okay,
happening is you'll take a double-sided cup.
right,
Okay, so it's like an air insulated cup. The
right.
space between the two cups, you put your GANs in there. And when you put your food on top, you're infusing that GANs with the energy of that food. So it becomes familiar with that chord, or that mix of energies that are in there. Then when you put water in your cup, it gets transmitted into the water. So you can take like a tablespoon of everything in a 5-course meal, infuse that into your GANs. Every time you fill that cup up and drink it, you're getting a 5-course meal.
And so when you fill the cup up with water and you have it sitting next to the GANs in that double container, um, at what how long do you think you leave it in there with the GANs? Um,
I believe it's instantaneous.
okay,
I haven't tested it, but my friend James from Michigan, he did a very similar thing with cannabis, and it didn't take very long. He only left it, I think, 15 or 20 minutes.
interesting.
And he was able to absorb the healing and the effect of the cannabis just in a glass of water.
And I've also heard of people putting cannabis in when they have a tube of GANS that they're wearing around their neck, putting a little piece of cannabis in there. Um, so it's a way to maybe amplify and transmit the energy in an organic substance.
Think of it like recording it on a cassette,
Nice.
where you can record it on the cassette, you can record that energy, you can record that information into the GANs, and then you can take a drop of that GANs and go give it to somebody.
Very, very cool. So go ahead. We've kind of taken a little sidetrack here. You were going about the copper GANs, and then you're probably going to get into the iron, but you were just talking about the properties of each one.
Yeah, pretty much. And the iron, like I was saying, the CH3, which is a red, or it's almost kind of a rusty. It's a strange red. It is basically just pure energy to do stuff. And I am under the impression I'd like to try it. I don't have enough to try this with right now, and it's been mixed. My copper oxide or my CH3 has been mixed for a reactor, so I have to make some more. But that's what I'll be doing today. What I'd like to do is try that in a pad and make 2 pads, put them here when I go ride my bike.
Nice.
And see if I ride all day long and I don't break a sweat, then I know, because I can go 4 or 5 miles and then my legs are starting to get tired. If I go 15 miles and I'm still wanting to do more, then that energy is coming from somewhere, and the only thing that's going to be changed is I'm going to have the energy readily absorbing.
So again, the way you're talking about doing that is taking some of the water that's sitting on top of the iron or red GANs,
Yeah.
and putting it on a paper towel in a Ziploc bag.
And then putting it in your pocket.
Yep, and putting it in your pocket. So for people to just get how simple it is to take this stuff and put it into a form that we can wear on our bodies or use on. Somebody had written me and asked me about about your dogs using the CO2 pad on your dog, and she was really excited and asking more details about that. I could look that up and ask you. I don't know exactly where that message is though.
Well, actually, what I described is the whole thing. There are really no more details other than making the pad. And the pad is you take some of the water. You only need like about half a cc, maybe 1 cc. Put it on a paper towel. It doesn't have to be soaked, just moist. Put it in a baggie, seal it up, squeeze all the air out of it so it's nice and flat, and just stick it on what hurts.
Nice.
That's that easy.
Nice. I was thinking of another question, but I can't remember what it is right now. Well,
Okay.
Why don't we go ahead and let you begin showing us what you got going on there.
All right, let me switch cameras. There we go. Now I've got here the stuff that we're going to be working with today. And let me get some gloves. It's always a good idea when you're working with nano or GANS materials, wear gloves. If you don't, you can actually put your energy into the nano materials.
Right.
And then if you give them to somebody else, there's a possibility that you can transmit some of your issues to someone else. Because it's, again, this is a brand new thing. We want to be careful with it because we're not really sure. Like I was saying last week with the pens, we don't know where the limits are, and we're just learning that. You know, some of the areas where the limits are now. Oh, these are great gloves, but they're kind of hard to get in and out of. They fit really good. Okay, we just made these. Pat made these. My landlord, Pat, he's sitting here next to me, and he's very curious about what's going on. He just made these using the crock pot method, and this is the source of this copper is a piece of 2-inch pipe, copper water pipe.
Wow.
And he took it and took I think he's going to go get what's left of it. Yep. Or actually, it's 1.5 inches. Is it 1.5 inches? Yeah, 1.5 inches. So this is the source of the copper.
Nice.
Okay, it's very high quality copper, very nice stuff. It wasn't that expensive because it was an offcut from a plumbing shop, and a little short piece like that they couldn't sell, so we got a really good deal on it. And we just took it and cut it up with a jigsaw, and beat it with a hammer and pounded it into flat strips, and that's what we used to do this with. And I don't know if you can see, but that is a beautiful nano coat.
That is a beautiful nano coat for sure.
And there's the other side. Absolutely gorgeous.
And so did you nano coat with heat or with glass?
A crock pot.
Crock pot. Crock pot with the caustic in it?
Yes.
Okay, right.
Yes, we did, basically we boiled it for, what, 3-4 hours in the hot caustic bath. Let it sit overnight. It actually boiled dry, so it was partially nano-coated the next morning. And then we did 2 steamings and kind of an extra little bit of a steaming just because a mistake happened. So that was basically a bath and 3 steamings for these plates, and they turned out beautiful, absolutely gorgeous.
I can tell they're really nice. Yeah,
they are, and they're excellent job. So I highly recommend the crock pot. It's really easy. It works really good. The next thing you need are some little pieces of wire. This is something called hookup wire. Whoops, I'll leave that over. You can buy this. I got this from the source. They have a little bag of red, blue, and black, or red, green, and black. And it's 22 gauge hookup wire. Now, if you can't get 22, don't worry about it. The size doesn't matter. I use the thin stuff because it's easy to work with. If you can only get 20, you can only get 20. If you get 24, you get 24, whatever. Doesn't matter. This is so it's easy to work with. And I know some people, they get really stressed out. Oh, he said 22, you got to use 22. No, you don't have to use 22. This is what I'm using.
So this is copper wire, and when
Yes.
you say it's hookup wire.
Well, that's what it's called. If you go to the store, if you go to the Source or Radio Shack or anything and say, I need 20 gauge or 22 gauge hookup wire, they're going to know exactly what you want.
That's for like hooking up speakers or something like
that?
that?
Nope, it's not. It's for hooking up electronic circuits.
Okay.
And where's the end of it? Right there. If you notice, it's a solid copper wire. Okay, one little thin strip of solid copper. You don't want to use stranded wire for this, because then you have the wires all twisted together, and you have a interaction in the fields, and it creates weird things happen.
Perfect.
So you want just nice thin, plain old basic copper wire. And the way I'm going to do it today is you hook one wire onto your nano plate. You just run it through the hole in the plate and twist it together. Leave one end nice and long, and one end I'm going to use as a way, whoops, I missed. There we go. To hang the plate.
Very nice.
Okay? Very simple, easy, quick, fast. You can squeeze that down nice and tight so it doesn't fall in. It doesn't have to be any more complicated than this. So we're going to be doing copper and zinc today. So I've prepared a piece of zinc. I just took a regular paper hole punch and popped that hole in it. And I was actually surprised that worked. I figured the zinc was going to be too tough. But this stuff, this is specifically, this is a product called Moss Boss, and I got it at Home Depot. It's a 50-foot roll. It's this big when you get it. And it's just a long roll, about 2 inches wide. And it's quite thin, easy to cut. You can cut it with scissors, really basic. And
I tried to get that at my Home Depot here, and they didn't have it, but they ordered it for me, and it was here in like 4 days. So I was able to look it up online and order it as a moss strip and pick it up at their desk within just a few days.
Yeah, that's about the easiest way to get a zinc plate or a zinc strip is if you go. There's lots of places down in down south where they don't have moss growing on their roofs. It's really hard to get. So, but in Canada, it's especially here in BC because we're in a temperate rainforest. It's everywhere. Like we got.
Well, what would be another source, JC? If you couldn't get moss strips, what would be a source of zinc? I mean, I drew a blank trying to figure out what that would be because it took me a couple weeks to figure out how to get it.
Old alkaline batteries.
Old alkaline batteries.
The cases are zinc.
Wow.
Most of them, you can pretty much tell because the zinc is soft like lead, very soft, and it tends to stay nice and shiny. So
So you just take the battery apart?
Yeah, wear gloves. Do it somewhere. The goop that's inside is probably not very good for you, so
Right.
don't get it on
And
your
when you say old, you just mean used, right?
Yeah.
Like a used up
Yeah,
alkaline.
like not the brand new high output flashy batteries. I'm talking just a basic regular old Duracell or an Energizer, the old style Energizers. Old, any old batteries, and the older the better because then they're going to have a higher quality zinc in it. If you can get the old volt-and-a-half phone batteries, you're going to get a really good quality zinc out of those. Now, pretty much anybody on the planet is going to be able to go to Amazon and order zinc strips. If you have a metal supplier, you'll be able to go and order zinc from these people. It might be really expensive in your area just because it's never used there, so it's something brand new. But you should be able to get it, pretty much anywhere on the planet. And if you need to scrounge batteries, moss strips for your roof, where else would there be zinc? I suppose unless you wanted actual pure CO2, you could go with a galvanized sheet metal because that's a zinc coating. But once that zinc coating comes off, you're going to start exposing steel to your system, and you're going to wind up getting a little bit of CH3 in there too. But if you're mixing it all together anyway, you're fine. It's not really going to make that big a difference. So what I do is I'll take my piece of wire. Actually, I need to do it over here so you guys can actually see what I'm doing. And I slip the wire through. I know I want to hang that wire on the edge, so I'll leave, maybe an inch and a half sticking out. And then I'll twist it in so it's nice and snug. That didn't really come up very snug, but I think we'll be okay. And bend that down because that's my hook where I'm going to hang it on the side of the container. And I'll hang it on the side of the container, just like that. And the copper one, which I did earlier, you do the same thing. And that hangs on the side of the container. And then you take these two wires, one of each, and you twist them together. So that's basically your system right there. That's it.
That is very well done. Can you tell me again, what did you call the wire that you're tying them together with?
Hook up wire.
Hook up wire. All right.
Okay. Now, we didn't pre-measure the water, so I'm not really sure how much water is in this, but we need to measure how much water we're going to use so that we get the right ratio of salt.
You know what I did, JC, the first time I made GANS? I had Dead Sea salt because I had been using it to make ormus, and it made the best GANS because I think it has a lot of minerals in it. But basically, I'll let you get into the different kinds of salts. But I was really, and then I tried seawater after that, and the seawater just didn't percolate like that Dead Sea salt did.
Oh, okay. Well, I've did it 3 different ways. I've used the pink stuff, I've used the gray stuff, and I've used this stuff. And they all worked. I mean, they all worked sufficiently. This stuff is so cheap. This was $1.42, I think, at Walmart.
And that worked just as well as the fancier salts?
Pretty much, and I didn't have to filter it because the natural salts, there's stuff in there that won't dissolve. So if you're using a natural salt like a gray sea salt or even the pink stuff, mix your water up and then filter it through a coffee filter, because otherwise you'll get salt sediments at the bottom and contaminating your GANS. But the white table salt, and read the instructions. You don't want. I was looking at one. It had sodium isocyanate in it, and I don't want cyanide in my GANS production, so I didn't buy that one. This stuff, this is salt and salt, calcium silicate, and sugar, potassium iodide, which is pretty. It's about as basic a white table salt as you're going to get. And I believe it's the sodium that's the most important in this. So you want a decent sodium. But this actually, it says it doesn't have sodium in it. It's got calcium silicate and potassium iodide. So I'm wondering, actually, this is going to be an interesting test because this isn't sodium chloride. So I'm wondering if it's even going to work. We shall see. Well, it says salt. So yeah, it's got sodium chloride in it. All right, we're fine. We're okay. So let me move this so it doesn't get all wrecked. And we're going to measure out our water. Now, I don't know exactly. This is a 2-liter bottle, but it's 2 liters up over the, over top up here where the top of the lid is. So I don't really know how much we're going to be able to fit into that. I'm thinking about 1.25 liters, which would be perfect. But we're going to fill the jar up. This is distilled water. And we'll fill it up to about there so we don't get our wire, our copper wire that we put on our plates into the water. We want to keep the copper wire that are connecting the plates together, we want to keep it dry. Okay, so we get a nice big measuring cup. And let's find out how much water we have. And if I estimated right, it should be 1.25 liters. Oh, I'm a little over that. Just short of 1.5. All right, that'll work. Okay, so that's 1,800 milliliters, 1.8 liters-ish, somewhere in there. Now, I got gloves on, so I can't open that. Can I get you to open that up, please? A 1/2 cup is 125 milliliters. So I'm going to go a little weak on my salt solution, and I'm going to go with a 1/2 cup in just short of 1.5 liters, which is going to wind up being about roughly 8%. Maybe a little bit, it might be a little bit stronger than that, but we're looking at somewhere around 10% salt solution. So 1/2 cup, and in cups, if the folks that aren't dealing with liters, let me finish this and I'll give you the volume in cups. There we go. And it doesn't have to be exact. If you're out a little bit, I don't think it's going to matter that much. Okay, what does it say here? 6 cups. Okay, so a 2-liter pop bottle, cut just at where the lump comes, just above the label, filled 1 inch from the top, is 6 cups of water.
So that's nice. That's easy. I mean, that's a nice, thank you for converting it. So
6 cups and a 1/2 cup of salt.
6 cups and a 1/2 cup of salt. That's really easy.
Okay, and we'll put the salt in there. And then we get our nice little happy face. Got to use happy, man. You got to have fun doing this because you're putting energy into it. You got to have fun doing it. So you get a happy face spoon if you got one. And this can take a while, so I'm just going to start stirring, and we can come up with something else to talk about while I'm stirring. Because it's going to take a little while for this to dissolve.
So people can pretty much get any kind of salt. And how important do you think the distilled water is?
Very important. Rainwater is the next better thing to use if you got really clean. I mean, um, if you're 10 miles east of Los Angeles, don't use
You
the
might not
rainwater.
want to use rainwater. Yeah, I was hearing pretty fantastic reports from people that were using rainwater.
Yeah,
They were having
really good
fantastic
results.
gains for GANS production.
Yeah, and if you can get really clean seawater, that's about the best. And you don't have to mix anything with it. You just use the seawater. Now, again, like you had mentioned, some people have had mixed results with this. Some people have had really good results with the seawater, and some people it's been a total disaster.
I think I got really spoiled by using dead sea salt in my first batch because I'm not sure why, but the people that make Ormus swear by the dead sea salt, so
Yeah.
I'm not sure why that was, but and
Well,
for some,
Ormus, you got to keep in mind, Ormus and GANS are not the same.
I agree, I know.
Okay, Ormus is matter state only. There's no, well, everything is plasma, but there's no free plasma in Ormus.
I think one of the reasons they're doing it is because of the gold in it. But let's not get off on that subject.
Yeah.
Anyway, my second experience with seawater, which came from right next to the coast in Florida, didn't make GANs as fast. So I was kind of, I guess I need to just have 3 or 4 different experimental pots going on and just see, kind of compare how they work.
Yeah, if where your weather comes from is a relatively clean area, use your rainwater. Now, if you're in Arizona, you're going to have to go and buy distilled water because you're only going to get a half an inch of rain a year,
Right.
right? And in BC here where I live, it's a rainforest, so we get a meter of rain a year.
So are you using rainwater or are you using store-bought
This
distilled
is
water?
this is store bought distilled water. This is
There you go.
and we did that just because it's simple. We don't have the tubs and stuff to go collect rainwater and ways to keep it clean. And
Well,
around here we are what 40 miles east of Vancouver, and we got Seattle to the southwest, and all our weather comes from Seattle and Vancouver. So we're going to get all the pollution and crap from that in our seawater or in our
send it to
rainwater.
you. I was thinking about our Mission Impossible Peru team because Dave is down there and he's wanting to make, these units as cheaply as he can down there. So they've got tons of rainwater.
Oh
Um,
yeah, their water is fantastic.
but you want to know what's interesting about the salt? Because water sources are so scattered, guess what the major salt additive is? Fluoride.
Yeah,
I learned that about South America and Mexico because water sources aren't as centralized as they are in the United States. So now they're adding fluoride to all the salt down. How do you think that would be for making GANs?
um, well, if you just leave your water open to the air overnight, most of that garbage is going to evaporate out.
You think so?
Well, fluoride is a fairly reactive element.
Okay.
It wants to find stuff to stick to, so it's going to go looking for things. And chlorine, if you got high chlorine in your water, just leave it, pour it in like a juice pitcher or a big cup like this, and just let it sit overnight, and it'll be fine for you in the morning. If you can get out into the woods and find a nice little bubbling stream coming off the side of a mountain somewhere, use that water
Right.
if you have no other alternative. Because that's a high organ content. It's very clean. It's living water. It's already happy. And
Happy water. I like that.
well, if you are not freaked out about drinking raw water, when you drink from a clean stream in the middle of the mountains that has no industry or nobody living around it, it feels different. You can feel the difference, and brought that up to Pat when I moved up to the mountain on him. I was so glad that we were getting our water from a stream running down the side of the mountain. And we sat down and he had a glass of bottled water and a glass of the water that came from the stream, and you could taste the difference.
Oh yeah, I've drank a lot of wild water in my day.
Yep. All right, so we got our water done. Well, it didn't take that long to dissolve. Now we just fill this up. Put the salt water in there, about 10% solution, thereabouts. I guess this is probably somewhere 8.5. I don't know. I haven't actually done the math, but we're somewhere in there. And there we go. We're done. All we do is we sit and let that sit, and in the next in 24 hours, you should easily see a white precipitate growing in there. And in 3 or 4 days, there should be a good thick layer, a good solid layer in the bottom.
So do you not put any cover over it, JC?
We're going to cover these.
Okay.
We got a house full of dogs. We got like a dozen dogs here. And this is an old house, and it's kind of dusty. So we're going to put, we'll put a cover of some sort on there just to keep the...
And you just slide a little cover under that wire. So you want to keep the wire up out of the water, and you don't want to cover it, really seal it.
No, you can just take a plastic bag and just slip over the top.
Okay, so you could even put that over the wire.
You want to let the gases move, right? So you don't want to seal it.
Right.
But I'd want to keep dust and dog hair and bugs.
Well, that's a great idea, just to put a plastic bag over the top too.
Yeah.
That would, let air circulate, but keep the keep whatever's floating around in the air out of it.
Yep, and the other systems are all the same. Same setup. When you use your copper and copper, you just replace the zinc with a piece of copper. When you do the iron, we went down to the hardware store and we bought these. These are 6-inch plain steel nails.
Nice.
And we got 6 of them, and they just said, yeah, whatever. It's not worth the paperwork. Just take them.
So what is, I know this is a really dumb question, but I think of iron as something different from steel.
Steel and iron are essentially the same thing. The only difference is the carbon content.
Okay.
Okay. Iron has a very, very high carbon content. As you take carbon out, it transitions to steel. So steel, depending upon the type of steel, a mild steel like a 1018, which is basically what these are made of. If I remember right, it's about 3% carbon.
So would just any nail do?
Pretty much, as long as it's not galvanized.
Okay.
That's what I say. If you see these, that's just plain metal. There's no dusty coating on it. There's not coated with anything. They're just plain steel.
So let me take a few steps back here on what you just held up. You held up the iron, you held up the copper, but each one of those is going to go in a container with a nano-coated piece of copper.
Exactly.
So let's review
that's why we have 2 more pieces of copper here.
Great.
Okay. One is for copper and copper, one is for copper and iron. And the only difference, the setup is the same as this. The only difference is you replace the zinc with the copper, or you replace the zinc with the iron.
That's perfect. And so do you think we are going to want to do a nano coating video, or shall I just post the nano coating one that we have from, what's the guy's name?
Armand. There's lots of nano coating videos out there. There's lots of them. There's actually quite a few the GANS making videos out there too.
Right.
But they're
okay. We can have I really like what we're doing. It's elementary, and it's got some good explanation around the edges instead of just the physical aspect of it.
Yep.
So I will post Armand's nano coating video under this one. And again, with that nano coating video, some people are starting to do the nano coat in, say, a crock pot. Pick up a crock pot at the thrift store or whatever, an inexpensive crock pot, and then you're using caustic or lye in the bottom.
Yeah.
And but the crock pot is allowing the steaming process to go on for a longer period of time.
Yes, and so far the nano coating that we're getting out of the crock pots is amazing.
Nice.
Absolutely beautiful, and it's pretty much stupid proof. You can't really screw it up. Because
Cool.
we did, and we still wound up with a really good coating.
You know, I am gonna, would you think, it probably isn't realistic for me to think about cutting up copper pipe and hammering it and all of
Yeah.
that. And I've still been a little hard pressed for getting, while I was in Michigan in this cold country, I was thinking I would look for a company that does copper roofing and see if I could get some scraps from them. Do you think that would be a good idea?
That's excellent stuff. That's exactly what I use.
Okay.
Now this setup, this isn't my setup. I'm setting
Right.
this up for my landlord Pat, and we're right now building our own power reactors.
Right.
I've got one. He's got one. We're gonna do a big quantity of GANs. That's why we're doing our GANs in 2-liter bottles.
Right.
And once we get all to the same point, then we're going to parallel our systems.
So the GANs that goes in the power units, and I wanted to mention this, is basically all three types of GANs.
Yep.
And then they're mixed together, and then they're allowed to sit out and kind of evaporate a little bit, right?
Some of it. The GANs that you put on the coils, you take about, again, it's not rocket science, so if you're out a little bit, it doesn't matter. About 20% GANs, 80% water.
Do you
Again,
want to pop your face back up, JC?
use distilled water. There we go.
There you are.
Use 20% of your GANs mix, 80% distilled water, and just pour it over the coils. You don't want to jam the coils full of GANs. That makes your system not work. That's why so many people are having issues with these systems not working, because they're not following instructions. Mr. Kesh said, don't mummify your coils. You want just a thin, very, very thin veneer.
And explain to us one more time how we do that.
Take about 20% GANs and 80% water, distilled water. Mix them together so it's soup. It's very, very thin.
And this is the 3 GANSs mixed together as well, right?
Yep.
Okay.
So it's very tiny, tiny quantity of GANs.
Right.
For the center balls in the center of your reactor, you want a really thick GANs. So you let it sit open, let the water evaporate out of it, and you want to catch it when it's a very thick putty, like not warm plasticine and not quite cold plasticine, but sort of stiff, really stiff putty.
Would it be as stiff as like Play-Doh?
Yes.
Okay. So that might be an example, a little more pedestrian example.
Yeah, well, I remember doing old windows, and I recognize it as window putty.
Uh-huh.
About the consistency of window putty.
That.
Play-Doh, plasticine, it's all basically the same stuff.
So when you mix the 3 types of GANs, are they going to need to be equal parts, or does that not matter?
It doesn't seem to matter.
Okay. And some people, oh, go ahead, sorry.
I would go, I would strive for equal parts, but that much of that, that much of that, right. That much of that.
Right.
Have fun. Play with it. The plasma doesn't care. All it wants to do is enjoy itself.
Right.
So it will tell you. You'll pour it. That feels like enough. Okay. Well, that's enough. It'll tell you what you want. Just be in connection with it.
Nice. And then some people are even making GANs out of brass, right?
Yeah. Well, brass is copper and zinc.
Okay.
So you're getting a combination brass, but because of the combination of those 2 materials, you're getting a third frequency out of that, which is making a separate thing, and you get a different kind of GANs than you would if you had copper GANs and zinc GANs and mixed them together.
Nice.
Which is very interesting. But I wanted to show how to hook the nails together, because some people are going to have some issues with that, especially people who aren't mechanically inclined. So let me switch it back to the table. And I use a piece of wire. This one's considerably longer. This is about 10 inches or so, I guess. I don't know. I just guessed and cut one and went, yeah, that'll be long enough. Take one of your nails and the wire. Make sure you leave a little bit on the end because you need something to hang over the edge of the container. Just take it, wrap it around the nail, put your next nail in, wrap it around that nail, put your next nail in, and I stack them like one on top of the other just to make it easy to wrap. Wrap around the next nail. Now that's going to be pretty heavy, and one little skinny bit of this wire isn't going to be enough to hold it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put one on the other end too. So if you look, if you can see this, I've got two wires that I'm going to loop over the edge like that, and that's enough to hold those nails up. Okay, and you still have plenty of wire hanging out the top, which you connect to your nano copper plate, or to the wire coming off your nano copper plate.
I can't even tell you how cool this is to actually get to watch you doing this. I'm like, aren't you smart? I thought you were just going to use one nail, and here you are using three. And then, you know, your handy dandy way of hooking it on there. I mean, it's just really helpful to.
Well, I'm using three because it's almost the same size as the copper plate that I'm going to be using.
Nice. That makes sense.
Okay. I don't know whether it matters. It feels right to me to do it that way.
Cool.
And keep in mind, oh, another thing, keep in mind that when you do hang your nails from the side of a container, it's going to fall over. So you might want to not put them on there until it's full of water.
Right.
Because a 2-liter pop bottle is not going to stand up. If you're using like a Rubbermaid container, it's probably heavy enough to survive. But just be aware that you put, an ounce and a half on the side of a pop bottle, it's going to fall over. And that's basically it. There's not a whole lot more to it. Come on, switch. There we go.
How is it? Here we are. This is like so simple, and it's a mystical, magical substance. I mean, GANS is so much fun. And here we are just tying together a couple of pieces of metal, one that has been nano-coated, and we're using copper wire to tie it together. So are we actually sort of pulling electricity out of the field? I mean, what is it about tying the wires together? What is that doing?
If you have a copper plate and a zinc plate in salt water, you have a galvanic battery.
You have a galvanic battery. What does that mean?
Okay. Galvanic is a chemistry term of exchange of ions.
Okay.
Okay. The two materials, dissimilar materials in the salt water, one is going to want a negative ion, one is going to want a positive ion. So they're going to become polarized. We hook them together with a piece of wire.
Is polarized magnetic?
Partly, yes.
Partly.
It's not really specifically magnetic, but there is a magnetical component.
But some of the atoms or the molecules are turning a certain direction, similar direction or something.
Some lose an electron, some gain an electron. Okay. It could be lining up of the field so that the molecule itself is polarized. One end's positive, one end's negative, or it could be the entire molecule itself is either positive or negative, which is an ion. And I'm pretty sure all of these things are going on here. But when we take a system like this and we hook that wire to it, we're stopping that galvanic battery. Because all of a sudden it can just flow. There's no buildup anymore.
Okay.
And so people are saying, well, you're just making a galvanic battery. You're just electroplating stuff off of there. That's not what's going on, because this is a short circuit. And the battery is not a battery. There's no buildup of ions happening. But what is happening, as that energy is flowing through the water, it's creating this plasma field between the two plates. And somewhere between those two plates where that field is hitting just, well, when the two fields are connecting or interacting just right, you've got an area there that's just sucking carbon out of everything. And Mr. Kesh mentioned when he was talking about the Fukushima reactor and the cleanup, one of the cleanup processes for the ocean, if you were to have one side of this in a submarine, one side of this in an airplane, basically traveling over the ocean, you would be drawing whatever conditions you're looking for from miles away.
Wow.
And it would only take like a couple of 2-3 weeks to clean all the crap out of the ocean.
That is amazing and awesome. You know, and it needs to happen over where BP put the core exit in the oil spill as well.
Yep.
This kind of stuff, I knew that we're really close to being able to do some of this major cleanup we need to do really fast. And it's just going to take putting it together and doing it.
One of the folks that has gotten in contact with me, Joel from GG Trust, he's working, one of the groups that are working with Dave down in Peru with MIP Peru.
Right.
One of his focuses is mercury remediation.
Oh.
Because there's thousands and thousands of hectares down there that you can't live on because it's all contaminated with mercury.
Is that from mining?
Yes.
Yeah.
From actually the gold extraction from the mine.
Right.
Mining itself, it's a little hard on the environment, but it doesn't fill it full of mercury. It's when you actually extract the gold out of the dust that you use the mercury. And I was thinking that a very similar process to what Mr. Kesh has talked about for Fukushima would work for mercury. You create a system with a condition inside of it that wants mercury, and it would just absorb it right out of the environment.
That is awesome.
Now, how to do this, what interaction you require, I don't know. I'm looking at the math. I've been questioning this now for about a month and a half, trying to get some sort of a rule of thumb as to what do you mix together and what are you going to get out of it? How do you predict what you're going to get? And apparently there is a way to do it, but I'm not finding it right now.
That is, but you know what? These answers, it's like we're on the brink of these answers, and it's so great to have it out in this pool of many minds, because together we will come up with the needed solutions.
Yeah, I mean, it could be something as simple as a nano-coated piece of lead and cobalt.
Right.
Okay, it could be that simple. You put those and you put them 9 inches together, 9 inches apart with a tub underneath, and the tub fills up full of mercury. It could be that easy. I can't really say. I don't know.
Right.
But this is one of the things that I'm looking at for Joel in GG Trust. I put a call into the foundation to see if I can find someone who's got some time and the expertise within the lab to be able to do this.
Nice.
My position is growing a little bit in the foundation, so I'm getting a little better access to some people. Nice. And I'm hoping to be able to actually talk to the folks at the research center.
Great.
And say, look, this is massive. It's not just Peru that's like this. We've got mercury problems in the U.S. They've got mercury anywhere where in South Africa, anywhere where they've done gold mining.
Well, and then you think of where uranium mining went on in the American Southwest.
Yep.
That's some pretty, I've been out there and you can just feel the energy, there's an imbalance there that needs to be corrected.
And
go ahead.
That planetary remediation, drawing the man-made and the non, it's natural stuff. Mercury is a natural substance, but it usually occurs in really small quantities.
Right.
So it's man's responsibility that there are, millions and millions of times more in the environment than actually should be there. It's our responsibility to get rid of that, to take that and fix it.
Clean up the concentration.
Definitely. And if this process works out the way I expect it to, the way I think it should work out, it's going to be a very simple thing. Very simple. And farmers will be able to do it. Joe Average, who's got 15 acres and he's growing corn and cattle, he'll be able to go and build one of these things, put it in a bucket, stick it out in the middle of his field, and know that by next summer his field is clean.
How about cleaning up Roundup?
Roundup, DDT, well, DDT, that Roundup and DDT break down.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just time.
Right.
It's really all that's needed in there. They only have a life of a short period of time. But mercury doesn't break down. It's an element. It's as low as it gets. It's going to be in the environment forever.
So could we go back to our GANs and just the explanation that you gave a little earlier, just give that again, where we've got these two plates and this polarization is happening and the wire is, I don't know, you explain it. I'm not going to try and repeat what you said, but then what's happening to make those molecules drop to the bottom? There's this interchange.
Well, okay, they're not molecules, they're atoms.
Atoms, okay.
And they're not actually even atoms anymore, because an atom is the hard little ball.
Okay.
This is GANs. It's the same material as the atom, the carbon atom, or the however that works. It's the same material. It's just it's a really loose but stable field. Okay, it's like popcorn. You can either have the popcorn kernel, which is a hard little thing, and you try to chew it and you break your teeth. I know, I've done it.
Right.
Or you can process it. Poof! It becomes a soft little thing, and you can do anything you want with it. And this is one of the problems that a lot of conventional physicists were having, especially with fusion energy, is they're taking these hard little balls and they're bouncing them around, and they're just bouncing off each other like billiard balls. If they were to process that material so that it's a big fluffy ball, when the two come into contact together, they just pass right through each other and you get your fusion. They're just doing it backwards. They're doing it the hard way instead of making it the easy way. And what we're doing here with this is we're doing it the easy way. Now, if you could visualize between the nano copper plate and the zinc plate, if you could visualize fields traveling in there, they're going to interact just like my fingers are interacting. And where they interact, where those fields cross, there's going to be sections that want carbon. It's a magnet for carbon. And it draws the carbon in out of the plastic, out of the air, draws it into the solution, which mixes with the oxygen, making carbon dioxide. And when it does that, even though it's this big puffy field, its mass is more than the mass of the water, so it just settles to the bottom.
I love it. That is really cool. Really exciting. Very good stuff.
It's pretty easy. And if, I don't know, you can't really see it on camera, but this is already starting to get cloudy.
Nice.
So
can you hold it up a little bit? Oh, yeah. There it is.
Yep.
Yep.
It's already starting to get cloudy.
Oh,
If you notice, it's hard to see with this light, but the bottom is a little cloudier than the top.
nice.
And that's only been, what, 15 minutes?
Right.
Hasn't been that long. I'm not gonna take time and set up the other ones on camera, because that's the same thing. You do the same thing. I showed this one with the nails because that's kind of a trick to get that, hook up that wire so you have a hook on each side. But that's really it. It's the same process for all three.
So then question number 2 is, once you've made a batch of GANs, so you end up having a batch of GANs made, you'll have that bottle sitting there and you'll have white stuff in the bottom of it, which is your GANs.
Yep.
And you'll have water on the top. So then what do you do with it?
Well, when you extract it from the salt water, it's going to have a component of sodium, going to have salt in it. So I'm going to use this as an example. When you extract your GANs, put it in a separate container.
And you would do that maybe with a turkey baster, or you'd pull the water off.
A syringe. I use a syringe.
A syringe.
I just go to the vet and get a big monster syringe they'd use on a horse or an elephant.
Okay.
Right?
And so are you taking the water off from the top and removing it, or are you pulling the GANs out from the bottom?
It depends on what you want to do. You can draw the water off and then draw the GANs out, or you can just stick the thing into the bottom of the container and start sucking the GANs out. But what you'll find is that stuff is it's got a weird weird consistency to it. You can put the syringe in there, and if you don't move it around, you're going to make a pocket, and all you're going to get is salt water.
Interesting.
Because the GANS isn't. It's. I don't even know how to describe it. It's not a fluid. It sort of acts like a fluid sometimes, but when you try to suck it out with a syringe, it doesn't want to be a fluid. It's more like a solid, and you can create voids underneath. So you need to kind of get in there and move your syringe around as you're drawing the material out. But you can draw it out that way. You can take the thing, you can pour the water off, and it'll stay in the bottom. And as it slowly gets to the end, just before it drains into what you're draining, you stop and you pour that into something else. But you take your fresh GANS, which is out of the saltwater reactors, put it in a separate container, and then fill that container up with fresh distilled water. Give it a good shake, set it on the counter, let it settle. Pour that water off, do that 4 times, at least 4 times. But 4 times is sufficient to get the salt content low enough that it's not going to affect any of the systems that you're working with. And then you always, when you do that, unless you're going to dry your GANS and use it dried, because there is a purpose for dry GANS, leave it in a bottle of water. And if you need some of that energy, just draw some of that water off, replace it. You'll never use up your GANS.
That's how I've been keeping mine in Florida. And my GANS seems to be kind of gradually diminishing.
Well, it continues to settle. It'll get thicker and thicker and thicker.
It's getting more dense.
If you were to take, if you start and it's half the bottle and you go away for a month and it comes back and it's a quarter of the bottle,
right?
Just give it a good shake and set it on. You're going to wind up with a half a bottle again.
Oh,
it'll keep compacting as it ages.
And so then, if you want to make the gummy or dehydrated, I guess the stuff that's more like putty, you take 3 different GANSes and you remove the water from them.
Yep.
And so then you have the straight GANS that's been washed, 3 or 4 washings of fresh distilled water, and letting it settle and remove that water. And then
just let it sit open.
You're going to make those concentrate into the more putty-like substance.
You just let it sit open and the water will evaporate. You got to pay attention and watch it, because when this stuff dries dry, it's almost impossible to rehydrate it. It'll always stay as a powder, and it'll never mix with water again. So you gotta really pay attention as it's drying and catch it at just the right spot.
Wow! So once you really dry it, it'll never mix with water again.
No, at least not in my experience. Anyway, there may be a way to do it.
And what is the use for that dry powdered GANS?
Specifically, I can't say, but I know there is a use for it.
Right.
Mr. Kesh did mention in one application, actually it was with the car coils, with those, because I remember I showed a little flat coil in a plastic container, and he mentioned that if I'm going to put GANS in that, make sure that it's dry GANS.
Okay.
So there is a use for it. I already know there's a use for it. I haven't really researched it because I'm pretty focused on a couple of other things. Right now. So
would there be any faster way to get it to dehydrate into the putty-like stuff, or basically you need to just let it go through the evaporation process?
You can use a very, very light heat, keep it warm, not hot, but just warm. Like if your computer's on all day and you got a warm corner on your computer, just set the jar on that. Okay. What we're finding is, don't go fast. Don't even try to go fast. If you take your time, allow it naturally to occur, you get better results.
And I think that's one thing about the GANS. You've got this natural process that you set up to go on, and you want to give it a couple of weeks to go through this process of making the GANS. And
allow it to grow.
And then in order to make the power unit, you're going to have to rinse it and let it settle a few days, and then rinse it and let it settle, kind of go through that process. So this is kind of a little bit of an ongoing thing. It's just not going to happen instantly. And then once you kind of get into that and you get it happening, and then you can end up with the end result of what you really need to use. And what we're talking about with the healing pens, why don't we come back to that? Because
Okay.
that's what we kind of springboarded this show off of, the one making the healing pens.
Oh,
Uh,
when you take your gloves off, take one glove off, ball it up in the other hand, and turn the other glove inside out.
Smart.
That way you don't. That's first aid tip number one. That's if your gloves are contaminated, you don't get that contamination on your hands.
Smart. So,
Paint
so
pens.
let's come back to the healing pens with the GANs.
Okay, if you're going to add GANs to a healing pen, you're going to make that pen very, very specific. It's still going to work just fine, but if you put CO2 GANs on that healing pen, it won't work for soft tissue. It'll only work for pain. If you put copper oxide on it, it won't work for pain. It'll only work for soft tissue. So that's why I mentioned last week when we did the show on the pain pens, I don't put GANs on my pens because I want them as versatile as possible because I don't know what I'm going to encounter.
Right. So we're just going to talk about GANs as a healing tool, and the way that that would be done is making your CO2 GANs, or making one of the GANs, as we've talked about the purposes of each one,
Mm-hmm.
but putting a little of the water from it. And this would be the water after it's been washed a few times and
Yes.
you've got a clean water.
Yes.
And then you're keeping it in the water. Like this might be one use for your GANs. You're keeping it in, I keep it in a nice quart jar with, full of good, clean, distilled water once I've washed it. And then, so then you can take a little bit of that water and put it on a paper towel in a Ziploc, close the Ziploc, and that becomes a healing pad.
Yes.
Or using the iron GANs, it might become a strengthener. Or didn't you say somebody's sleeping with GANS pads under their
Mm-hmm.
mattress or in their mattress? And
Yep.
which kind are they using?
CO2.
CO2.
The folks in Philippines, they just released a little bit of a video on the health workshop. I think it was a week ago, and they're combining the GANs with nanomaterials, that's fine to do, but know why you're doing it because you're creating very specific conditions.
Right.
Now, if you were, if you hurt your knee, say you got an ACL injury, and you make a healing pen and you dip it in CO2 and then can't figure out why your ACL isn't getting better. It doesn't hurt anymore, but it's not healing any faster. It's because the CO2 doesn't work on soft tissue. It works on your nervous system.
Okay.
You need to know why you're doing what you're doing. There's lots of people out there with the reactors, with the GANs. Their expectations are unrealistic because they don't understand what they're doing.
I would love to write up a little document to go with this video, and maybe I'll just tap into you for it. Maybe I'll write it up partly and get you to contribute to it, and then just have a little guide as to CO2, nervous system, copper, and what those letters are.
Well,
Soft tissue.
yeah, I suppose I don't think there's an actual central guide anywhere with
Okay.
all of that information in it.
Right.
But the information is certainly available out there. You need to dig around and find it. And again, like I said last week, this isn't paint by numbers. You can't just follow the instructions and expect it to work. You
Right.
need to know why you're doing it.
Yeah. And I think people who are kind of in the healing arts anyway, or people who are experimenting with natural ways to heal, if they make up a few of these things for themselves and then play with them different ways and see how they're getting results, it's a really good, helpful to the whole process too.
One of the things I did notice, speaking to people, some of the really sensitive people out there, energy sensitive people, they feel it.
Nice.
All you have to have is the GANs in their vicinity, and they know.
Nice. That's very cool.
So once we become attuned to the energy, I think we'll all wind up getting there.
Right.
Is that while we live in a sea of it, we've never actually had concentrated energy in our hands before, and now that we do, we can actually remember what it feels like.
And that's a really nice word term for it, concentrated energy. It's
That's
really what it is.
basically, yeah, that's pretty much exactly what it is.
Cool.
It's a broadband concentrated energy, and depending upon what kind of GANs you have, determines the uses and what it's going to interact with.
Right. Cool.
Pretty basic
Awesome.
stuff. And that's about it. So I guess it's going to be a short show.
That's okay. Thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. And we'll have to do another one of these days.
Okay.
And
Yeah, just like I say, give me a couple of days notice. I got lots of things going on right now,
okay,
and it's only going to get busier. So
great. Well, join us on the Naturally Better TV online TV network. It's a great, we say, turn your televisions off until they think of something good to say. And meanwhile, don't shut down your mind. Open up your mind to all the fantastic, amazing, great, and wonderful new things going on. And the naturallybetter.tv, that's the web address, naturallybetter.tv. You can look up Carrie Ellis, 21st Century Superhuman. You can look up John Anderson. You can look up Cash, but we also have, there's many other people making fantastic shows on this network. And we invite you to join us and to wake up your mind, wake up your life, and be an implementer of these awesome new earth technologies. See you
most.
next time.
Bye bye, everybody.
Thanks, JC. See you soon.
You too.